I served in the 449th Bomb Group, World War II.
Did you volunteer or were you drafted?
I was drafted.
How old were you when you entered the war?
A couple of days less than 22.
What regiment were you in?
Can we turn that radio off?
What's that?
Can we turn that radio off?
Yeah, turn it. It's over there.
Could you pause it? Dad. You paused it, right? What regiment were you in?
I was in the original member of the 449th Bomb Group.
How?
I was never in a regiment. I was in the Air Force.
How much and what kind of training did you receive?
I took my basic training in Biloxi, Mississippi. Went to aviation mechanic school there. And from there I went to B-24 Consolidated Factory in San Diego, California for a couple of months. Then I went to gunnery school in Texas for a couple of months. Then I went to Salt Lake City, Utah for a couple of weeks to learn to take guns apart. And from there I went to Tucson, Arizona. And while I was stationed at Tucson, Arizona, the 449th Bomb Group was formed. And I was one of the original members and one of the original planes of the 449th Bomb Group of 15th Air Force.
What were your expectations of war and how were these expectations met?
Well, my expectations was that we were going to win the war, but other than that, I don't know what you mean. What? Ask the question again, please.
What were your expectations of war and how were those expectations met?
Well, my expectation was that we were going to win the war, and it came about rather quickly. I was only in the service for 40 months.
Where were you stationed and did you relocate often?
You want to hear? I was drafted into the Army, New Cumberland, shipped to Maryland, got uniforms from Maryland. In a couple of days I was shipped to Biloxi, Mississippi, where I took basic training in mechanic school for a couple months. And in the fall, November of 42, I went to San Diego, California for a couple of months. From there I went to Texas, gunnery school for a month or two. From Texas up to Salt Lake City. This is all the first year yet. Well, that took pretty good care of the first 6 months that I was in. But then I was stationed in Tucson, Arizona, and at that time, in my service yet in the Air Force, we had private dining areas of women serving the tables. Like, you can't imagine that. I bet. Imagine being in the service and going to a regular dining room and being served. But that's the way it was for a while. And then when the 449th Air Force Air Group was formed, I was assigned to that. And I had one of the first planes. We had 4 planes, 4 squadrons, and four planes when we started. And we went down to Albuquerque, New Mexico for training there. And from there I went to
Orlando?
I went to Orlando, Florida for field training, you might say, learn how to live without any. Went to school and they were based there, and then was shipped out in the swamp for a couple of weeks where we didn't have no facilities at all. Then back to Albuquerque. From Albuquerque, I come home and leave and got married. And while I was home, I got a notice to report back to Hebron, Nebraska. That's a real small town, smaller than Millersburg. I had to find out of my own, being a country hick like I am, going into Chicago, Grand Central Station in Chicago, and asking how to get to Hebron, Nebraska. They didn't even hear of it at first. But anyway, I got there. And, well, I'm ahead of my schedule. Yeah. No, I'm not. Yeah. At Hebron, we got training, get ready to go overseas, and from there, from Hebron, Nebraska, we went to Italy. I was supposed to go to Italy, but my ship happened to land in North Africa on Christmas Eve in pouring rain. They put us out in a tent where there was water running through, like a creek through the tent, and we weren't expected. We were landed there by mistake. Our boat landed in North Africa by mistake. Imagine that. And Christmas dinner, we had Spam for dinner. A can of Spam. And we were there a couple of days, then we got on an English ship and went up to Naples, Italy. And that's where we were stationed then for the rest of that war. I was stationed down in the heel of Italy. Naples is in the toe of Italy, you know, Italy's shaped like a boot. And I was down in the heel of Italy for the rest of the war. I lost 2 planes I was crewing. I was a crew chief, ground crew chief. The first plane was shot down. Second plane was a night takeoff, which I never done. It was an invasion of southern France, and everyone was gone. So it was 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning when they took off. Pitch dark. And it was always that particular plane that I had at that time was a hard plane to get off the ground. Seemed to need a little more runway. Anyway, halfway down the runway, I said to my buddies that were with me, we couldn't see the plane. Just by hearing it. I said that, I believe that's our plane going down the runway. Halfway down the runway, and boom, in my mind it blew up. It's hard for me to take, but that's the way it happened. A hour or 2 later, it blew up just the way I seen it. That upset me. It hit a high tension wire, didn't get over a high tension wire, a mile or 2 beyond the runway. And it was fully loaded with fragmentation bombs and gasoline because they were going up to France. And they didn't get it. Being a night takeoff, and he didn't get it pulled up over the high tension wire a mile or 2 beyond the runway. They hit that and blew up. Everyone was killed.
What was your daily schedule like on a day that you were not in battle?
Well, our planes flew at least an average of 5 days a week. They take off in the morning, come back late in the afternoon. And we had to meet them when they come back, and we had to be around the field. Someone had to be around the field in case they come back early, you know, make an early return for engine trouble or something. But from the time they took off in the morning, we were on our own pretty well until they get back late in the afternoon. And that's when we worked on them until got them ready for the next day. And we didn't have too many days while on duty to be off duty, but we did get vacations. I did spend a week on the Isle of Capri, and I spent a week up in around Greece, up in the coast, up in I think it was off Greece. But when we were on our home base, there wasn't too much to do. The towns in that area, so they're very poor, and not much to them. Farming was. I'll show you a picture here of farming. I have a picture somewhere. Here's some. That's all stuff where you can look at that. I don't know where my pictures are from. But anyway, they were farming with oxen and carts, two-wheel carts. And it was a poor country at that time, in 1943. They were stationed in southern Italy there, or southern Italy. There was a lot of olive groves. We were camped in an olive grove. And they had a lot of nice people. The people around weren't bad. And first week we were there, we had latrines set up in an open field. Drums of a hole cut in. So go out there and sit in that, and Italian women would walk up to you while you were sitting on the can and ask you to do your laundry. So that's how that was. Some of my buddies went hunting one time with the Italian farmers, and they shot some birds. And they were invited to the farm for dinner. They served these birds with heads on and everything, you know. And my buddy said, well, he took one he thought would look like a quail, and he knocked the head off of it. They hollered at night, no, best part. They chewed up them heads, they said. So, but we had a good bomb group. We were responsible for knocking out a lot of the oil fields up in Romania and them places, and then knocking out railroad yards. Our group made a lot of trips to polish the oil fields in Romania. Our particular squadron, 718 Squadron, which I was a member of, got a citation once for finishing a mission. Our planes, our squadron planes, and how the whole 15th Air Force were the only planes that completed the mission and come back. And got a citation for that, the whole squadron did.
Did you keep a journal or a diary? What did you do during your downtime?
Slept. We slept in tents. We didn't have no barracks. And there was nothing. We had nothing else to do. No recreation facilities at all. We just went into an olive grove in Italy and set up tents, and that was where we were the rest of the war. We didn't have no mess room set up or anything at all. Had to come later on. I did go into town, the little towns close by a couple times, but I went into that one little town. They were kids and women who were running around stumping grapes, so they go out with their bare feet, and then they go out in the street and run around, then back into the grapes again. And that's no lie. I see them do that, smashing grapes with their bare feet, and then get out. And they had open sewerage in the streets. And it was a very poor place.
Did you write home often?
Did I write home?
Mm-hmm.
I wrote home almost every day. Yes, to my wife. Yeah.
What kinds of foods did you eat?
We had a lot of Spam. A lot of sea ration hash. That was just a canned hash. We had little sausages, like little hot dogs that come in cans, stuff, little things like that, and we had powdered eggs. When the first one over there, it was green. They make them eggs. It looks like green slime. That's all it looked like. And the officers got up and made an award, cash award for the cook that learned to make them eggs that we could eat them. And that's the way. We didn't get a lot of fresh stuff. It was all mostly K rations, C rations. We didn't have a lot of fancy cooking. It was on the poor side. I weighed 120 pounds when I come home from overseas in 45, and the war was over in beginning of May in 45. I think Germany surrendered, and I was home for the 30th of May here. I gained home for a month, and I gained 30 pounds.
What's the difference between a K ration and a C ration?
K rations are dry. Crackers, cheese, a little hard candy, that kind of stuff. And the C rations were canned stuff. Can't quite explain what C rations are, but they all weren't good. It was canned vegetables mixed together.
Were you involved in any battles, and if so, which ones?
I was not involved with any battles myself. I was on the ground crew. I was crew chief of an aircraft, ground crew chief. So, but our planes were involved in a lot of battles, Pulaski oil fields and places like that in Europe, which I can't explain. In that big book there probably tell you a lot more where they went and stuff.
Were you wounded or injured in the war?
This is my only wound. That was from working on an airplane. I've got a piece of steel in my arm.
How long were you away from your home?
I was home I left here in June 42 and came home in the end of October 45. I was home in 45. I was home the month of June from overseas. We got off the ship. They told us have a good time. We were going to reorganize and go to the Pacific. We reported back and sent out South Dakota, ran through a northerly room, and how long you're overseas, this and that. They said, you guys are finished. You're not going anywhere. That was before they dropped the bomb. They knew the war was going to be over before the bomb was dropped. Some of the older men in our outfit were discharged right away. I went down to Clovis, New Mexico, and I had signed up to be discharged at Indiantown Gap. And I don't think there was anyone left of me anymore to be discharged. And I finally got notice Indiantown Gap wasn't accepting any more Air Force personnel, so I was discharged from the Army in Texas. Took the nearest separation center to where I was and got out.
What was your most memorable experience?
Well, I think the first time I went up in a B-24 and they come in land and made a bump, and I looked out the window and we were about to go over top of a hangar. I never forgot that. Looked out the window and seen that we had bounced over the hangar along the runway. That was an experience for me. And another experience was running off a runway into the end of the runway, off the end of the runway one time. And one time over in Italy, I went along up and we changed an engine or something. They liked the ground crew to go along up, test it. So they left me fly the plane. I had top wing was going like that, and the bottom of it was standing still. I was spinning like a top. So I didn't make a good pilot.
How did the war change your life?
Well, being a veteran probably gave me opportunities that I wouldn't have had if I wouldn't have been a veteran. I come home and back to my old job, tool factory here in Millersburg, and that didn't suit me very much at all. And then I soon ended up down the Air Force base in Middletown working for the Army again at Middletown. And then from that job, I transferred from the Air Force base in Middletown into the post office here in Millersburg. Worked the rest of my career in the federal post office. So if I'd been in the Army, I probably wouldn't have got them opportunities like I had without any education or anything.
Did any other members of your family serve?
Yes, I had two brothers served. I was in the Air Force when there was three of us. I was the oldest. I was the first to go. I went to the Air Force, and my next brother went to the Army, and the third one went to the Navy. So we had everything covered pretty good. Air Force, Army, and Navy.
Have you kept in touch with those you served with?
Not in the last number of years. I haven't been in touch with anyone. I did hear from different ones still, but most of us are, a lot of us are dead now. The old fellows, I know a lot of my buddies are dead. I get a book. I get information here. I get that there a couple times a year, and it usually has a list in of the ones that passed away, and here's deceased members, new members found it. So I was in the 7th, 18th. I don't think in this issue there wasn't one from the 7th, 18th that died in this report. But that's how I know a lot of my friends are dead. This is B-24 reunion. They have a reunion every year, the group I was in. I get this a couple times a year. Gives the information, a lot of information of different things. And that big book I have there is a history book of the group. Here's some B-49 pictures. Living quarters 6, 7, 16, 7, 17. You want to look through it. I seen a lot of planes come back. A lot of planes come back shot up.
Can we see that one paper?
This one?
That one. This is the newspaper.